And one thing I wanted to say, there is some content that if you've seen me before, it is similar content, because I want to make sure we're all under the same understanding on the basics. I'm also adding some, I want to talk about a few new features, one that was announced last week and one that it was actually announced this morning. And I'm just gonna point it out as because these are useful items, so I want to make sure, especially the one that was announced last week. I'm a huge fan of that one, so I'm probably going to spend some time on that feature to explain that. But I do like to start with the basics to make sure that we're all in the same understanding. Again, keep those questions coming in the chat. The team is going to monitor, and then every once in a while we'll stop to address those questions as well. And all right, let's just jump right in. This is a little bit of an overview of the agenda. And I'm using slides, and you see probably a ton of slides showing up. Don't be scared. I really do spend 80% of my time on a live demo. But there are certain subjects that you just need to cover with slides, especially things related to architecture. So I'm going to try to get some of those out of the way early. And then we'll spend some time on the demo. I will have to come back to the slides at some point, especially when we talk later on about Fusion and UEBA, because it's just easier to explain it with slides, and maybe when we get to sizing and pricing too. But again, I tried to spend the majority of my time on a live demo because I believe that's the way that people understand these concepts better. That's the way that I learned. So, all right. So these are the Microsoft Sentinel's core capabilities, and I'm going to cover each and every one of these at some point today. Normally, I do like a part 1 and then a part 2, and I split it in half, but today we're doing it all, at least all 3 hours is going to be all covered today. And I'm not going to rush. I'm just going to take the time, because I know sometimes I tend to go fast because it's typically there's not enough time, but today we have plenty of time. So I normally start with the data connectors, and that's the piece that you probably, if you've seen me present on Sentinel before, that's probably the piece that you're going to be familiar with, because I do like to make sure that we're all under the same understanding, because not everyone has understanding. And then I'm going to move on to some of the other features. I'm also going to spend, because this is a training that is for partners specifically, and a lot of our partners do managed security services, I am going to spend time on that. Lighthouse, Azure Lighthouse is the, I guess, the tool for managed security service providers. And it's also a tool. You don't need to be an MSSP to need to use Lighthouse. Sometimes you have some very large customers. I've seen customers that have over 1,000 tenants just for themselves internally. So you can still use the same setups to be able to do that. And then I'm going to walk you through all of that so that you can see. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that I have a lot of links, and I'm actually going to put this in the chat because I'm going to reference a lot of the links that are there, which is actually, Internet will tell you later that they're going to be updated even more so with some of the newest links. But a lot of the links that I talk about are going to be included in there. So it's just a list of links for partners that have proven to be useful to partners in the past. And like I said, I'll mention them as I go. All right, so let's get going with data ingestion. And as you probably know by now, Sentinel runs on top of a log analytics workspace, and that is an artifact that exists at subscription level. So, and so does Sentinel. So every permission, everything that is going to be related to Sentinel log analytics workspace is going to be at subscription level. And the one thing you've heard me talk about this before, and you're probably going to hear me talk about it again, is that we at Microsoft always say that we haven't met the data source that we haven't been able to ingest into Sentinel. I like to highlight that a lot because Sometimes I get spreadsheets from customers or from partners that say, hey, can you ingest all of these because you're migrating from a different legacy theme or because those are the requirements of the organization. And there's a lot of options. Typically, it's more about choosing the right option to ingest the data rather than saying, can it be? The likely 99% of the time, the answer is going to be yes, it can be ingested. You just have to pick the tool, the right place to do it, the right way to do it. So we start with some of the data connectors. So start with the native data connectors, and I'm showing them separately because these are coming straight into the Log Analytics workspace. And by straight, I mean in the backbone of Azure. So they're not actually going through the REST API, as you'll see some of the third-party ones are. So these are actually coming directly into Log Analytics workspace. Keep in mind, some of this data is always free, and those are some of the links that I have shared with you. So things like the Azure Activity Logs, the Identity Protection Alert, the Defender for Cloud Alerts, Defender 365 Alerts, and incidents, all of that data is actually going to always be ingested for free. And it will continue to be for free for the 90 days of retention. If anything you keep beyond that is going to be billed. Also, keep in mind that a lot of these are actually bidirectional. So if you are managing Defender 365 for your customer and you're also using Sentinel, if you close the incident on either side, it's going to be reflected on the other side. So this makes it a whole lot easier for a SOC analyst to be able to go back and forth. And I'm also going to show you during the demo how those links show up into the incidents. Let's see. And you're thinking why? And this is not a question that I get often, but I do get it once in a while. It's like, why would I look at the incident data on Defender 365 versus Sentinel? Sentinel is going to be able to correlate that to other alerts, to other incidents. So if there's an incident that was reflected in Defender 365, it only sees the products that Defender 365 has access to. It's not going to be able to see maybe alerts that are coming from an EC2 on AWS or a VM on GCP or a VM on-prem, or maybe an alert that is coming from Defender for IoT from some PLC in some manufacturing facility. That's what Sentinel is able to do. It's able to correlate and see, especially a multi-stage attack type incident, is going to be able to track it from where it started to exactly where it ended up at. Okay, and we continue to some of the other data that is going to be ingested into Sentinel comes from Azure Diagnostic Logs, and these are like things like your SQL servers, your firewalls, your VNets, NSGs, App Gateway, CDN, and you name it. That all can come in here. And again, still coming in directly through the backbone, not coming in through the REST API. And the last one is, of course, your Azure VMs. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to get data from other VMs. It's just saying, hey, these are actually coming straight. Okay, so now we have our partner connectors. And by the way, they're available through the same navigation as your other connectors. They're all, for right now, they're under the data connectors blade. Again, something that I'm going to cover during the demo. I just want to go through this first. But they're also going to be shown through the Content Hub as well. And the difference is that now they're actually coming through the REST API for these external ones. And some of them are actually going to have some prerequisites, like I was talking about AWS earlier. That connector does require some roles with specific permissions on AWS. There's a script provided that will take care of that, so you don't have to do like those steps manually, but you will have to do some of those steps ahead of time. Some of our other connectors also all are going to require a REST API connection. So, but typically the instructions right there when you're installing it, there's a set of instructions that as long as you follow those, you're going to be good to go in a matter of minutes. And then some of them actually give you options. Like some of them you just deploy it automatically. Like if it includes a function, or it'll give you the option to create the function manually. Some, there's a wide variety of options available. Some of these are Microsoft supported, and if you go to the documentation, you'll see which ones are which. Some are Microsoft supported, some of them are partner supported, and some of them are actually community supported. And actually, one of the links that I share in there is the Azure repository. And I always tell my partners, when you're going to create something new, like even it's a playbook or a workbook or whatever it might be, don't reinvent the wheel. Sometimes there is something out there in the repository that is either exactly what you need or very, very close, and you can just modify it. So I would get myself very familiar with that repository, because it's going to become very useful to you, and probably going to involve you doing less work, less custom work, I should say. All right. And then we move on to on-prem. So from on-prem infrastructure, there's still various options, but most of your data sources from on-prem are going to be agent-based integration. And if you're familiar with our agents, you have the one that everyone's probably familiar with is the Log Analytics agent. But now there's a new agent. There's a AMA agent. I'm actually going to spend a little bit of one more slide where I'm actually just going to talk about that agent and why it's good. It kind of shows you here, though, and it kind of gives you a little bit of what's coming. It's really, that's the agent that allows you to rules, because they don't just show up for the agent, they also are going to show up with other data that is ingested. So now we have the ability to do transformation upon ingestion, which I actually wrote a blog about that, which is probably linked in the set of links. But you can do things like data masking of social security numbers upon ingestion if it's something that you need. And some of those data sources will be like these third-party ones, and those same data collection rules that you use here for the agent are the same tool that you're going to use to do that that transformation. And I'll show this as I go through the demo. You can also configure log forwarder to ingest logs and then send them over to Sentinel. And you can do that for both agents, by the way. And if you're using Logstash, you can continue to use Logstash to connect your data sources to Sentinel, or if your customers are using it, they can continue to do so. Actually, I want to highlight the Ceph and syslog connectors, because a lot of the times there's some like very legacy, to put it mildly, applications that still support syslog and cephlog. So even though you're not going to see a connector listed for some of those legacy applications, at least not listed in the documentation, you still will likely be able to use syslog and ceph connectors to be able to connect those data sources. So those are like the ones that it might be like one size fits many. And also there is some of these are also supported using the AMA log, the AMA agent. There's some new documentation. One of them is on preview. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's a staff log. It's actually on preview right now. I believe it's still, I think it went out of private preview to public preview recently. So you should be able to start, if you are in the process of moving to the AMA agent, and that was one of the things that was holding you back, it's available now on preview. All right, so just keep in mind, and I'm going to move here. I was going to say, keep in mind that even though you don't see a connector listed, there's other ways. There's likely a way that you can do that. So just because you don't see it in the documentation, don't assume automatically that it's not supported. Another area, and that was the area that I added here, we if you have any OT devices, especially even those that are air-gapped, we have Defender for IoT, and Defender for IoT can discover and can protect those devices regardless of physical or network location. This is becoming a really huge area of discussion because of some of these devices are running in very legacy systems, and they sometimes people don't even know what they have. So Defender for IoT is a way to bring in some of that data into Sentinel. There's even, it's not only the connector now, but there's also a solution on Content Hub that adds some more playbooks and some, there's a workbook that was added too. So I'll point that out as we go. And then you have the final one, sort of. It's really the custom applications. And there's actually some examples in the documentation. I think there's some using Python and PowerShell, and there's other popular languages that are listed there. You can use Azure Functions to ingest data. You can use logic apps to ingest data. Actually, I'll show you one logic app that is configured to ingest data. It's really ingesting for threat intelligence data, but it's kind of the same concept of being able to connect to Sentinel. And there's just a lot of options. So it's really a matter of evaluating the options and then deciding which of these works best for my specific or my customer specific requirements. The difference between some of these is that likely you're going to see some of these Content Hub solutions and connectors that are actually going to come with extra artifacts. Some of them will come with their own playbook, like the Rubric solution comes with a connector, but it also comes with like 5 or 6 playbooks that add, automation, and it makes it easier for you to actually support the incidents that are related to that. Let's see. All right, so this is the log analytics agent that you should be used to by now, but should be migrating out of also, or planning to migrate out of. And this is the new AMA agent. I'm actually going to move these slides. Yeah, there we go. And this is the AMA agent that everyone should be working towards migrating. The reason is the existing agent is actually going to be deprecated in 2024. And I know that sounds like a bit away, but I would, if you're starting right now with nothing, start with AMA if possible. If you have a lot of these existing agents, I would start also the process of migrating so that you can make sure that you get there before everything is deprecated. Plus, it's also going to introduce some really neat features. I've actually seen people moving to this just to save money because of the ability to use data collection rules. So what it allows you to do, and this is a brand new concept that came in originally when the AMA agent was introduced. So it'll allow you to say, certain VMs within, and it could be on-prem, and it could be whatever your VMs are. I want these to send only specific security events to the log analytics workspace where Sentinel is configured. But I don't want any noisy performance stuff that is not useful to me in the security area to come over here because I don't want to pay for it. So I can send that over to some other analytics workspace, but not necessarily the one that is associated with Sentinel. And I can do that, and again, I'll show you this during the demo. I can pick the specific security events, or I could choose from like the small, medium, large type thing, which is the common, all, or I don't know what the other option is. But I can also use actual saying exactly which security events by using a what is it, a collection, an XPath. That's the word that I'm looking for, an XPath, to say exactly which events I need and pick and choose from there. So it really gives you granular control and that ability to do event filtering and multi-homing, which is another feature that is not available in the previous ones. Also, AMA agent is actually a consolidation of 3 different agents. So it's not just a replacement for log analytics, it also replaces just 2 other agents as well. And then you're also going to see some of the connectors that are already showing up in the Content Hub or on the connectors blade where they're actually using AMA, like the Windows security events via AMA is showing there. All right, I'm actually gonna skip this and just cover. I'm not gonna cover a whole lot out of this architecture, but I do want to show you this before I even jump in, so that way I can stay on the demo without having to jump back to the slides. So this is the MSSP architecture that I was telling you about earlier. And the idea is, and this is always going to be the idea, that your customer data is going to be ingested into the customer workspace. And that customer workspace is going to be within the subscription that is owned by the customer, that is associated with their tenant. So all of these are separate subsidiary, separate tenants. And I said subsidiary here because it could be, like I was saying earlier, it could be a customer, but it could also be a very large organization that has different tenants. So the same model still applies. It's just that a lot of what I deal with is because they're MSSPs. So you're still going to have that data coming into the customer's workspace, but then you're going to have an equivalent workspace for your MSSP workspace or whatever central location workspace that is going to allow you to access all of these data. And the tool to do that is Azure Lighthouse. And again, I'm going to show you and I'm going to demonstrate exactly how you would go about configuring this. Because it's really straightforward. It's not a whole lot of complication to do this. I'm actually going to use the next one. This is a better one. So this is a little bit about how those artifacts exist, because you're going to have, like I said, all that data, everything that I'm collecting from my customer should come into this customer workspace. And this has actually been a subject of discussion recently, because I have MSSPs, large MSSPs that are coming from supporting customers using legacy SIEMs. And so they're used to ingesting all of the data and managing it for each of their customers. But this is a very different architecture for some of them that are coming from that mentality of a legacy SIEM. In this case, the customer data will always remain on the customer workspace, which is associated with the customer subscription. It's not going to come into my MSSP workspace. And there's a lot of benefits on that. There's a benefit of not having to be responsible for that, but the customer itself is actually going to be billed directly for that, unless you have a CSP type of configuration. If you have a CSP configuration, then you can do the billing through you as a CSP. But and you can even have a mixture of customers too. They don't all have to be billed in the same manner. The other important resources on both sides. And by the way, the MSSP white paper, which is one of the top links on the list of links that I gave you, it was just updated a couple of weeks ago. I don't think it's even been a month since it was updated. And it talks in detail about this and where do you want certain artifacts to exist? So for example, you'll have some analytic rules that everyone has access to. They're in the Sentinel repository. They came with a connector. They came with a Content Hub solution, and that's not like secret to anybody. So you could just run those straight out of the customer workspace. But then you're going to have other analytic rules that these are like your, this is your secret sauce. This is your stuff that you don't want anybody else to see. You can run them out of here, out of your MSSP workspace, still triggering things into these different workspaces or even gathering data from these workspaces, but they're going to exist over here. The same thing with playbooks. If you have playbooks that you don't care who sees them, you keep them over here. If you have playbooks that are, this is my stuff and I don't want anybody else to see it, then you keep them over here. So that's any protected IP, you want to keep that over here. You're going to have workbooks as well, that like a dashboard that I'm going to show you that, and you're going to have some where you maybe want to be able to look at the cost associated with all my customers in one place. You're going to keep that over here. You can also keep a kind of version of it over here too, because all the access is going to be granted via Azure Lighthouse. And that's the first thing that I'm going to show you when we get out into the demo. So because you're going to see things in my demo environment that you're going to be like, where did they come from? So I'm going to explain to you how I do that setup with Azure Lighthouse. Now, Azure Lighthouse only grants you access at subscription level. So, so that would be, you could do that for Sentinel. You could do that for Defender for Cloud if you're using that to manage your customers. But if you have customers where you're managing like Defender 365 for them, then you're going to need something like either B2B or Beta or GDAP. So B2B comes within Azure AD, and you can just grant, your users can be guests on other tenants. Or you can do GDAP, which is done through Partner Center, which is the granulated delegated access. And so that is the new replacement for the old DAP that was a little too permissive. So now the granular one is available and you should be migrating to it if you haven't. But that's how you would give access to your SOC analyst to anything that is at tenant level. And that would be like you're managing Defender 365 for them. You can still, all the integrations are still going to work in the same manner because it's all based on permissions. What do my users have permissions to? If I have permissions to see only 2 customers, then I'm only going to see, if I have a workbook here that looks at cost, and I'm only going to see the cost for 2 customers. If I have permissions to all 4 customers and I come here, then and I open that workbook, that cost workbook, and I'm going to be able to see all 4 of them. So it's all based on what I, as a user, it could be a SOC analyst, it could be a manager, it could be level 1, 2, 3, well, however you divide that. Whatever you give permissions to is what they're going to have access to. And then the customer, if the customer logs in to their own workspace, they're only going to be able to see access to theirs, which is what they have access to. And actually, the one thing that is mentioned here is it's kind of mentioned as an MSSP identity, but this is one of our recommendations, is to make sure if you are an MSSP, I always recommend, and you're going to hear it from various people at Microsoft, that you have a separate identity for your SOC analysts that are managing customers. And that would be, yes, a separate tenant. And is it more work? Yes, it's more work. But it is the recommendation for security purposes that you have a separate identity, because you're going to protect your own corporate resources as well as your customers' corporate resources in case there's breaches. Remember, in the zero trust model, we assume breach. So we're going to make sure that those entities are separate. Also, you don't want, your, for example, phishing emails that go to your regular employees to be associated with that MSSP identity. So having that MSSP identity keeps that attack surface to really to a minimum. And it talks a little bit about it on the white paper. It also that I mentioned, but it also talks a little bit about it in the CSP best practices documentation.
Angelica, one of the questions that I don't have an answer to is that, is there any limitation on the number of like subscriptions, a number of customers that you can bring in under one MSSP Lighthouse account?
No, if you're thinking about, so there's two Lighthouse, by the way. There's the Azure Lighthouse, which is what we're gonna, what I'm gonna demo now, and then you have the Microsoft 365 Lighthouse, which is really the target of that one is SMB type customers because they do have limits, and then those there's not just the limit on the number of customers, but more limit on the size of the customers. So it's limited to like 1,000 seats. It used to be 500, now it's 1,000. But on the Azure Lighthouse, there's no limit to the numbers. And I haven't seen anybody hit any issues yet. And there's some really large MSSPs using Azure Lighthouse right now. So that's a good question, though. And I'm thankful because it allowed me to clarify the two different lighthouses. This is the quick thing about implementing. Consolidate workspaces is the first place where we all recommend you start. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. Consolidate workspaces as much as possible. There are certain areas where you're not going to be able to consolidate. So if you have federal customers, they have to have a separate or any other compliance requirements. A lot of times, data needs to remain in certain regions. You're not going to be able to consolidate. So just consolidate as much as possible. There's actually a really good link included in the set of links that links to the documentation where it actually has a decision tree on when to go, when to consolidate, when not to consolidate, when to isolate, when not to isolate. And work across workspaces. I'm going to show you how you work across workspaces in the demo. Automate deployment and configuration. So this is actually becoming a lot easier to do now. There was the first feature that was added was repositories, and I actually will demo this repositories a little later today. So you can see this working. It's actually going to make it, and plus there's more stuff coming from the Sentinel team. They're working to automate these deployments for your management, just to make your life easier. And Azure Lighthouse, which is what I'm going to demo to be able to work across workspaces. And I'm also going to show you how you don't, it's not just the one area where you see all the incidents. There's also different areas where you can access workspaces. So I'm going to show you all of that. Oh, an optional, integrate with the ticketing system. We used to have a ServiceNow blog post, which was, I think it was like 2 years old. It was just updated last week. Well, they released a brand new one with integration with ServiceNow. It'd still be directional. It's they actually made it into a content hub solution, which is really nice. So it comes with the playbooks, it comes with everything. And there's a new blog post on that was just released last week. I believe it was Thursday or Friday. So if you're doing integration with ServiceNow, highly recommend. Actually, I'm going to see if I can pick it up so that I can put it in the chat because I don't have that one in there. Let's see, this is it. Just want to make sure that I share it with you. No, of course I have the old one. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I think I found it. There we go. Yeah, all right, I'm putting it in the chat. I just don't want to forget to share it. There's a lot of my partners that were really looking forward to this, so I'm sharing it with you. And then we do. ServiceNow is not the only one, by the way. We also have some playbooks in the repo that come with for integration with Jira and other ticketing systems. So again, if you are working with other ticketing systems, check the repository. There might be something out there already in there. Okay, I'm gonna actually stop sharing and jump into the demo. All right. I'll move this over here. And these are the links that I share with you. And actually, thank you to Andronil's team because they're the one maintaining that. So before I jump into Sentinel, I am going to, you're actually looking at several workspaces here. Some of them are coming from my directory, my tenant, and some of them are coming from my customer's tenant. So my customers Contoso, my customers 3MM834. How did I do that? Azure Lighthouse. So I'm going to start with that because then everything else will make more sense. All the data you're going to see is going to make more sense. So, so Lighthouse is actually my customers, shows up as my customers, but this is Azure Lighthouse, not Microsoft 365 Lighthouse. And there are two ways that you can create an offer. One is you just publish an offer in the marketplace, and ideally this is what you're working towards. In fact, that's my my job, to help you put these offers into the marketplace. That's what our team does. But in the meantime, especially if you're creating a POC, you're probably going to want to do that through ARM template. And that's another one. You know what? I'm going to just put my blog in there because I actually wrote a blog on that. And I'm just going to put my generic blog because I'm going to probably reference some of those in there. But I did create 2 blogs on this specifically. The same thing that I'm going to walk you through right now. I'm actually going to show you the view from the customer side first, because I think it makes more sense if you see it from the customer side, so that you see why it is that I'm creating this template. So I would go about create a template that says, all my customers, please delegate these permissions to me because I need them to do my job. But then the customer, from their endpoint, they go through service providers. That's the menu that they're going to for Lighthouse, for Azure Lighthouse. And then they're going to be able to either add your offer directly from the marketplace. So, you know, and like I said, ideally, this is what you're working towards. And you can have different plans as well, depending on whatever your team is capable of supporting. But if they don't, or if you're not quite ready to go there, you can start your POC with a template. And that's the template that I'm going to go about creating now. All right. So I go to here. This is and I'm going to create an ARM template. And I'm just going to do a test one so that you can see all the options that are here. And then I'll do one at and then I'll show you the configuration that I have. So when you're asking your customers to delegate access to you, you're asking them to delegate it at either subscription level or at resource group level. Ideally, it would be at subscription level. Resource group level is like if they have other stuff within that subscription that you just, you inherited that workspace that is where Sentinel is associated and you get no other option, so then do it at resource group level, but ideally at subscription. And then you're going to have to delegate different access. And you have 3 options: user, group, service principal, if you have some kind of automation. Obviously, you're probably going to want to do group because you're going to have a SOC analyst level 1, 2, 3, and people are going to come in and out of those teams. So you want to set up something that is set it and forget it. You don't have to reset it up for each and every one of them. And I have this Lighthouse, and I named it Sentinel contributors, but it could be your level 1, level 2, level 3 groups. And these are Azure AD groups. So, you can bring people in and out of those, and you can assign permissions based on membership to that group. And then you have these roles. In the case of Sentinel, actually, there was a new one added. This one's brand new. It was just added for a feature that I'm going to show you, but there's playbook operators now. But you have, in my case, I wanted to assign Sentinel contributors. So I put Sentinel contributors here, and I can either do permanent or eligible. So if you're familiar with PIM, this is very similar to that. If I do eligible, I can do a maximum activation, maximum amount of time to activate it for. And I can even require MFA before they even activate the role. And I can even require approval for somebody else before they even activate the role. And maybe not all your customers are going to require this, but some customers have very, very tight controls that they need these compliance requirements for. So this is actually very good that it's there and it's available. I'm going to leave it permanent for now, just to show you. And then you can actually add additional permissions. So you can add authorizations here. And in my case, I normally recommend that the same group that you gave access to, that you also give them reader, like a generic reader. And the reason is, if you don't, then they're not going to actually be able to see your, why is it not reading? There we go. Reader, this generic reader. That's the one that I'm talking about. And the reason is, if you don't add that generic reader, then you're not going to be actually able to see your customers once you're done. And I'll show you where you see those customers. And then you just view the template. You can download this template, and then you can upload it, drag and drop it into your customer workspace, or your customer tenant, really, to allow that delegation of access to happen. Once this is done, then you're going to be able to see what I see here, which is, this is my offer that was already added to this tenant. And I'm actually going to be able to see, I'm not going to save this because I don't need to save it. And then I'm going to be able to see my customers over here. Remember how I told you, if you don't add that readers, you're not going to actually be able to click on customers and see your customers here. And I actually have a few more advanced configurations here, and I'll show you the role assignments that I have, because not only did I need contributor, but also in my case, I had a specific scenario. This was something that I was testing for a partner, that they needed to be able to assign roles or permissions within the customer tenant. And that becomes the case when you have playbooks, especially, and they have a managed identity within that playbook, and you need to assign permissions to that managed identity within the customer's workspace. So you need to do this. And the way to do this is to use this user access administrator role, and then specify the roles that they can assign permissions to. And by the way, that is actually done manually. And it's actually the only way to do this is by creating your basic template, like we went about creating it, and then you go and you modify that template. I'm going to show you how I created this one. So the one that you're looking at is actually coming out of here. Oops, here we go. So I actually went and modified it, and I added the role definition ID for user access administrator. And by the way, don't be concerned with being the mighty powerful user access administrator. It isn't. It is really just used to be able to allow the assignment of roles within the customer tenant. And these are the 4 roles that they're going to be able to assign. And you can, modify this as needed, because the assignment of the delegating of owner is not allowed within Azure Lighthouse. So you can't assign, you can't just delegate owner to be able to assign these permissions. This is the way to do it. And again, that's one of I actually walk you step by step. So if you actually have to do this, look up my blog, because it actually shows you step by step how to do this. So besides being able to see my customers from here, which is nice and pretty, I'm also able to see this. That setup is what allows me to see all these different workspaces here. And it also allows me to, I'm going to select all of these. And it also, one of the areas that I can see is that I can view all the incidents for all my customers in one place. So if you see this in here, some of them are coming from my tenant, but some of them are actually coming from my customer's tenants. And I can still take the same actions that I would take from a normal, incident, like a view fill incidents. I can investigate, I can run, this is a typical incident. It's just that I'm able to look across all my customers in this case. But that's not the only place. So again, the permission is assigned to me as a user. So I can just go into, this is what would be the equivalent of my MSSP workspace. even though I do a lot of testing in them. But if I go into that workspace, I'm going to minimize this here. I can go in, as long as I have permissions to it, I can use the workspace command. I can specify the workspaces that I'm looking at and then run a query. I can also go into workbooks, and I can pick a workbook like the cost workbook that I was talking about earlier. And then I can view that. And when I view it across all the workspaces that I have access to. So it's based on what I have access to. So it's not just that initial multiple workspace view incident space that you can see across workspaces, but it's really within any place that you're at within Sentinel. Again, it's all based on what you have access to as the user. So that makes it a whole lot easier to be able to navigate. It's within Sentinel. All right, so keeping track of my time, and I'm going to start going through some of the core. Actually, I'm going to start going through the connectors, which is the first thing that I explained to you and I didn't show you quite yet. So you're going to see connectors here in data connectors. You're also going to see connectors on Content Hub. I think we're all moving towards everything being in Content Hub, but for now you're seeing it here and here. And the reason is, like, I'm going to show you AWS, which is actually, by the way, you see it in green is because it's connected and data is coming in. You can also sort them here too. So if you want to just see the connected ones, you can select those and see them. So if you see these connectors, they don't typically come just a connector. Like this connector comes with 2 workbooks, 2 queries, 65 analytic rule templates. So it's not, I'm going to open it so you can see some of the stuff that is in here. This is why I tell especially my MSSPs, when you're doing a migration from a legacy theme, don't, like, a lot of them are concerned, like, oh my God, I have to translate all of those rules that I had set up on that other theme solution. Don't worry about that so much. Focus on the data sources, because a lot of times, look, this one comes with 65 analytic rule templates. It's likely the case that whatever rules you had in place on the other one are already here. You don't have to worry about translating all of those. I'm not using all of them because maybe I don't need all of them, but you can create them as needed. And they keep being added, and even more so as you go. So just start, especially if you're doing migration, start with the data sources, see what's already in there, and then move on to expand from what you were doing previously. And by the way, this little green thing here shows because there is data coming in. So it just shows you that it's coming into AWS CloudTrail here. There is a newer, by the way, there's actually a newer, this one, I should really be using the new one. The new connector, it's the difference is, so the AWS CloudTrail connector is actually connecting to the CloudTrail API on AWS, and that has some rate limiting numbers in there. So this one connects through an S3 bucket, and so not only does it get around the rate limiting issue, but it also allows us to ingest different types of data. So like not just AWS CloudTrail, but also VPC flow logs, AWS GuardDuty. Especially if you're trying to bring all of your alerts into one place, that actually becomes super useful. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about in here was the agents. Remember how I mentioned earlier that there's new connectors with that use the agents? Actually, here you see DNS events via AMA is also in preview. And Ceph via AMA, it's also here already. So there's a lot that is already supported with AMA. In the case, I'm going to show you this one so you can see what I was talking about with the data collection rules, because I have a data collection rule set up here. So this is what I was telling you about. You can create this rule where you pick the various resources, and that could be so like in here it's going by subscription or within resource group, but it could be, it doesn't necessarily need to be a VM on Azure because of Arc. Arc allows you to connect VMs that are in other clouds as well as on-prem. So whenever I select this, I can select, VMs on-prem, VMs on AWS, VM on GCP, wherever they are, or an Oracle Cloud, wherever they are, I can select those. And then I can, and I'm not going to change it because I already have it selected, but then I can choose the types of collections that I want to stream into Sentinel. And these were kind of like the all common, this is like the small, medium, large type thing. And these, by the way, these are in the documentation. But then this is the new part where you can actually do a custom expression or a combination of custom expressions. So you could do something like this, where I specify that I only want the fail sign-ins to come into Sentinel, or I could do something more advanced like this. And I could say that only critical error warning information events from the syslog except event ID 6 are coming in. So you can really get very specific to the types of events that you want to collect, because it should only be things that are, first of all, useful to the security teams, but also things that you don't want to pay for extra stuff coming into Sentinel that you don't need to pay for. So that's where data collection rules really bring in value and efficiency at the same time. So this is where you would go about and configuring that. And there's data collection rules that are also used in another section. Actually, maybe I should cover that now. Let me go. I was going to cover it later, but looking at the time, I'm just going to cover it now. So I think I mentioned this when we were doing the setup. You can actually do data data transformation upon ingestion, and it is using this. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to open a different one. So when you go to your workspace, and for me, the easiest way is to come to settings, workspace settings, and then I go into tables. This was added a couple months ago. You can actually see all the tables that you're ingesting data into Sentinel. And there's various things that you can do in here. You can, of course, it's going to default to whatever you configured on your workspace, and I can show you where you go about doing that for your default retention. But you can also modify the retention here. So you go into Manage Table, and you can say, so I'm going to go, interactive retention is going to be 31 days, but maybe I need to keep some data into archive. So this is one of the new types, and I'm going to click 120 so you can see how it leaves some of these. The blue is what it calls the interactive retention. It's going to be stored into analytics table. So these are the tables that you probably, if you've known Sentinel, these are the regular old tables. But there was a new type of table that we introduced. There was actually two new types of tables that we introduced. One was basic and the other one was archive. So, and what that allows you to do is to pay less. There are some restrictions on the types of KQL that you can run, but it allows you to pay. And I'm actually going to pull up a slide just so you can see the types of cost differences. Here we go. And I'm just going to show you this slide. We can share this deck with you as well. We probably will. But this is the new types of tables. So this is again, the current ones at the time. Now they've been here for a little while. Analytic logs are where you can run full KQL. You can generate alerts. There's no query limits. And 90 days is included of retention. But these are the costs associated with that. When I flip this flag and I now have some data being moved into data archive, now I'm actually paying a lot less. and it's a lot less, you can see here. But then I'm going to have some limitations, like there's limited KQL that I can run. But there is also the ability to keep some of the data up to 7 years, which is really nice because there's a lot of compliance requirements that have that magic 7-year number. So this would allow you to meet that without having to move this data outside of your log analytics workspace. I'm not saying that ADX and storage account have gone away. It's still there, it's still an option, but this is probably an option that you should consider. And especially because you're going to be able to search, which is another feature that I'm going to show you in a little bit. You're going to be able to search this data and then rehydrate whatever you need. The beauty of the search feature is that if I'm looking for a specific user, user test 1 that happened a year ago, and I know it happened a year ago during the month of January. I don't need to bring all the January data back to be able to do my searches. I could just say, I only want the data that is associated with test 1 from January a year ago to be able to be rehydrated so that I can run full KQL and do whatever else I need to do that. So that's the beauty of this data archive. You're not paying as much for it, but you're going to be able to search it and then rehydrate it or restore is the word as needed basis. There are some charges, very small charges associated with the actual search job, so keep that in mind. The other feature that was added was the basic logs. So these are logs that are noisy. I was showing you earlier the VPC logs, how you can bring them in. Well, maybe those are really noisy logs. Maybe I want those to be, I don't want to pay for them. I don't need it to run as much KQL because there is reduced KQL capabilities. You don't want to generate alerts for them. You just want to be able to correlate data. You want your some hunting to happen against those. So it's very limited. And you're also, and the basic logs are only retained for 8 days. You can also do the same thing where you can actually move them to archive automatically. But this is another new feature that was added. And it's just less for noisy logs so that you pay less, but you're still able to do the things that you need to do with that. And I think I'm going to see if I have any kind of custom. I think this one maybe. Let's see. So this one, I can flip it to when now. Remember, it says 31 days because that's the default for my workspace. When I flip 1 day stays, and I can modify this as needed, but now it goes into archive. So it'll move automatically into archive from basic logs if I leave this setting here. Okay. So, but the reason that I was here to begin with was that I can show you some transformations upon ingestion. So AWS, and I actually have a transformation set up on one of these already. I think it's on this one. So this says edit transformation. If I hadn't created already, it would say create transformation. But this is some of the stuff that you can do. And see how there's a data collection rule associated with it? That's what it creates when I create this transformation. And in my case, I'm going to show you the, and you can modify this as needed. In my case, I am taking some of the columns. Maybe I don't want all of the columns. They have some data that is just not useful to me. I don't want to pay for it. I can take those columns away, and then I can also add other columns that I think are going to be useful to me. So all these types of transformation you can do through this area. And actually, in one of my blogs, this one, and I'm going to show it to you. This blog, you can reach it from mine. I actually link because I also show you an example of doing the social security number from the to mask that data before it comes in. I did this for a custom table, but I didn't create this query. I am actually taking this from the library of transformations. So this library of transformations is available to you as well, and this is linked in there. And you can do things like the masking of the last 4 digits of the social security number. So this is the piece that I was sharing in that blog. I didn't create this, somebody else did, and they nicely put it into this library, and then I make use of it. But that's the type of transformation that you can do using these data collection rules for other sources. There's not necessarily the sources from the agent anymore. These are now expanding. And another thing that I link in here is the types of tables that are supported, because not all tables are supported. So I link it here. So if you want to see all the tables that support transformations, here's the list. It's actually quite extensive list, to be honest with you. I think it's not, minimal by any means, but it is restricted to some of them. So I just want to make sure that you're at least aware of that. So these are some of those features that are kind of connected to our data ingestion. I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And I talked a little bit about search. So I'm actually going to show you that search blade here. So this is the, and these are prior searches that I have done. And by the way, I can select the table that I'm going to query, because I know that the data was in that table from wherever. And then I can just enter my search here, and it'll kick off one of these jobs. And then it'll search this query, it'll save these queries, and I actually don't have enough data in here, so I'm going to show you another instance that has some more data. This is my personal tenant where I have more permissions but less data, because I want to show you what some of those look like. So I'm going to pull up this tenant. And by the way, partners have access to this tenant too. This is one of those shared tenants that if you need to do the demo for your customers, let us know, because it's through CDX, that old demo site, you have access to this. So these are some of the saved searches in here. If I choose to restore, by the way, it creates this _SRCH table whenever I do a search, and I can actually see them from logs, which I'll show you in a minute. But if I restored any data, it'll create an _RST table, and it'll stay here until I come and delete it, by the way. So if you ever want to delete it back, you just have to come here and delete it. Those logs, those tables are also going to show in the schema here. See how all the search tables are showing here? And also some restored logs are also shown here. It's very much, showing through. Do remember though that there is limited KQL on that data until you actually restore it or rehydrate it. It's probably a better word for it. Okay. All right. Then the last thing I wanted to cover was content on ingestion. Content Hub, which I talked about. And so some of these connectors, I think I was showing you the rubric, or I talked about the rubric one, which I actually have a webinar on this tomorrow. And this one includes a connector, but it also includes some playbooks as well. There is a Cisco one that is right here. You have a connector, you have some analytics rules, you have hunting queries, playbooks, workbooks. So you have a little bit of everything. So that's why Content Hub is now really the place to look for this content. And you're also going to see things like this one, like the Log4j vulnerability detection, which is actually doesn't even have a connector. It's just a bunch of tools that we believe that we have shared with the community because they're useful in tracking this specific vulnerability detection. And actually, something that they did recently, you see how they're doing solutions, and now they have standalone workbooks. So if you're looking for a specific type of content, you can now query for the specific, like if I'm only looking for other people's playbooks and then I want to see what they offer, I can just search by playbook. This is a new feature that was added recently, and it's proven, I think it's super useful because it keeps you all organized. There are some solutions here, like I was talking to intern earlier about this one, KQL training. If you want to learn more about KQL, there is now a solution there. I'm actually going to click on manage so you can see what comes with it. There are some workbooks that come with it. I have actually, the reason why it says one item here is because I've actually installed both of them. And it comes, so you can actually click on the workbook and be able to see it here. And you can learn more about KQL. Just follow the steps through the, if you're looking for, to learn more about correlation, specific joins, it'll give you some examples. I think this is, so, especially if you're trying to train SOC analysts into specific topics. KQL is a little bit more advanced, but if you want to just start with like the very basics, there's a training solution. Super fan of this one. It actually comes with a little bit of data, a little bit of dummy data. So it comes with some incidents, but it's a really great tool to train your analysts. And it literally takes you step by step from creating the actual workspace to doing everything. And what I like about it is that it actually really covers the core. It covers the data connectors, analytic rules, incident management, hunting, watch lists, threat intelligence, and even Content Hub, which is what we're talking about here. It's a really good basic training for your analyst, and it's available for free. So it's not, any cost associated with it. And there's one thing to notice that, so Sentinel comes with a free trial, which is, like, as you can see, I've been using it. Or every new workspace, first 20 workspaces per tenant can take advantage of this. But this is really useful if you have these SOC analysts that are trying to train to get hands-on, because that's really the best way to learn. Use this trial, and you get up to 10 gigs of data per day that is included in there. And if you combine that with the Content Hub solution for training, you get some samples in there, and you really get the ability to get your hands dirty. There's a ton of other stuff in there, but I just wanted to show you some of the most important ones, or most ones to keep an eye out. All right, we're gonna switch gears a little bit to start going through some of these. And I'm actually gonna start with Watchlists. Sometimes I forget to start with this one, but it's gonna come in handy when we talk about analytic rules. Because I'm going to pull up an analytic rule that uses a watch list. They're kind of recent addition to Sentinel, sort of, maybe last few months, 6 months, maybe, or maybe it's a little bit more by now. But they really have been proven to be very popular. And you really see the value in these watch lists, because it allows you to, they can be used for many purposes. And some of the purposes, like, for example, I have here pen test IP addresses. So let's say I want to generate an alert, but if it's coming from this pen test IP addresses, then I want maybe either lower severity, or maybe I want just informational. I don't even want to create an incident for it. Then you can get the data from the watch list, get your alert, say, hey, if the IP is coming from here, then lower the severity, or don't create an incident if the IP is coming from here. Things like that. You can do some of the templates that are already created in here, VIP users. So let's say you have ELTs and you want those alerts to be very high so that they pay attention to them immediately. You can, create your alert and then modify the KQL so that if it comes from a VIP user, it shoots up, or maybe sends an email, or does, whatever automation you want it to do. Terminated employees is the one that I'm going to show you in a minute. In the example, But you get the idea. High value assets. It could be POS. Maybe any alert that comes from a privileged access workstation should really be looked at immediately, because those are my very powerful admins. Things like that. This is where watch lists come in handy. And by the way, there's many ways that you can create this watch list now. It used to be you just create it like manually, but now you can actually link it not just from a local file, but you can actually link from Azure storage and then just bring in the data, especially when it's a lot of data that you're bringing in, or really large tables that you're bringing in. You can view it on the logs, and you can update directly from here too, like if you needed to. Let's see. These I use for cheating. These I use for generating incidents. So that's why you see some of these being used here, and I'll probably show you later. But you can also add them manually in here to generate, to actually modify the watch list. But the reason why I wanted to explain to you the concept of watch list is because I'm going to go through the analytic rules, and I'm going to use some of those watch lists and some of the analytic rules that I'm going to show you. So there's different types of analytic rules. In fact, I don't know why it's not showing. Refresh. Okay, here we go. So there's actually rule type. There's all these, it's actually not showing anomalies, but also anomalies are part of the, they've actually been separated over here, but I'll show you in a minute. But there's really 7 types. Scheduled analytic rule is your typical analytic rule. And in fact, most of them are going to be scheduled. Most of the ones that come with the connectors and the Content Hub solutions, they're scheduled analytic rules. NRT is very similar to Schedule 1, except it's hard-coded to run every minute. And there's only a maximum of 20 of those. The reason is it's really for something that you're watching at the time. And it's not going to, the same thing that I'm watching this week is probably not going to be the same thing that I was watching last week. So they're going to vary. And again, they're hard-coded to run every minute. There's also no unions on those, also no joins of tables. Fusion, I'm going to spend a little bit of time after our break on Fusion so that it's going to be its own topic. And we have the Microsoft security ones. So these are the ones where you can create, these are the ones that are coming from Microsoft Security Services, but you can choose to create incidents only on some of those. And I'll show you what that looks like. And then you have your machine learning, your ML behavioral analytics, which are, they're proprietary, so you really can't see the internal logic on them. You can disable them, and you can set up automation for them, though. And then you have threat intelligence, which again, I'm going to cover separately as a whole. So I'm going to just show you some of the features. I'm actually going to start with the schedule query, and I'm going to pull one up that I play with all the time. So this is one. This is an analytic rule that is actually based on something that was out of the box, but that I modified it. And I'm going to show you. So all this does is it is a successful logon from an IP followed by failure from another IP. The reason I picked it is because it's very easy for me to generate this type of alert. But I wanted to show you some features within analytic rules, and this one comes in handy for that purpose. All right, so I'm going to walk. Obviously, you're going to have your name, your description, tactics, and techniques. This is an important area that you should make sure that you have your tactics filled out, especially if you create your own custom analytic rules, because the Fusion algorithm picks up custom rules as long as they have tactics and they have entity mapping. So just keep that in mind. You can set the severity, and you can, of course, enable and disable it for troubleshooting purposes. So this is the query. I'm going to expand this a little bit. Remember how I told you earlier that I modified it for a watch list, to make use of a watch list. So in this case, I have successful login from an IP followed by failure from a different IP. But I wanted to, and this is where watch lists come in handy. I wanted to raise the severity if the one of those users comes from the terminated employees list. And this could be users that are about to be terminated or employees that were recently terminated, however you want to keep that. Again, I just want to show you the features within it. So what I'm doing here is that I'm saying if it's coming from that terminated watch list, then I want it to be severity high. Otherwise, I'm just going to go okay with the medium. And also, if the severity is high, then I also want to change the actual name of that incident. What is going to show in the incident, the alert name is going to change to say, hey, it's coming from a terminated watch list. And then also another thing that I'm doing different in this within the KQL is that I'm actually getting data from identity info. So that is data that would otherwise not be available within the incident when my SOC analyst looks at them. But in this case, I wanted to be able to get information such as the job title of that person and the manager of that person and other things that I'm showing up in there, and the department, I guess, as well, I'm showing in there. So this is information that I can then add to my incident. And I'm telling you, I'm going to show you where we do this. So I actually do it here. So I have some account mapping, entity mapping, which is going on here. So this is basically taking the data that comes out of that KQL and mapping it to the schema that Sentinel knows about. So I'm taking this data, that success IP address, it's mapping it to a schema, because then these are the entities that are going to show up in my incident, things that I can click on later on. And that's going to be very important when we get to the UEBA part of this, of Sentinel. But on these custom data that I was pulling over here, I can then also show that data in my incident by adding this custom details section. So like I was getting that information about the job title or the manager. So this is actually going to become super useful, because when my SOC analyst looks at this, they're going to know exactly who the manager is of that person, and they can contact them. So especially if it was a terminated employee, that's something that is going to be useful to them. But you can see where there's a lot of cases where additional information from other tables is going to become useful. Especially if you're bringing in data from like the Defender 365 connectors, there's additional tables like device events and things like that. Maybe some of that information is going to be useful, and this is a good way to surface that to the incident. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. So this is the area where you can schedule those queries. And remember how I told you that the NRTs are hard-coded to 1 minute? The minimum that you can do here is 5 minutes. So if I go to 4 here, I'm going to get an error, because it's between 5 minutes and 14 days. So that's why those NRTs exist. Because if you need something to run more often, then you're going to go with an NRT. And then you can configure how far back you look, how far you look back, I guess. You can also do some event grouping, and you can suppress it if you're doing some kind of testing. So for incidents, in this case, I didn't want them grouped together, and the reason was I wanted to generate more alerts, because again, this is a demo instance, but likely you're going to want these to be grouped together. And I'm actually going to use a different alert analytic rule to show you some of the newest features that we have added when it comes to grouping after this. But things that you can do here, you can group them if a single incident meets all the entities match, which is really the recommended, but you can also pick specific entities. Like in this case, I can pick the account and the IP, or I can even select the one from those custom details. Like maybe I want to group it if the manager matches. if they're all related to the same manager, or, you know, whatever makes sense to me, the department, you know, whatever makes sense to me, I can do a combination of those. I don't want this enabled, so I'm gonna not do that. Okay, and this is one of the new feature that I was telling you about earlier that was added, and it was announced last week. It's now in public preview. I was testing this when it was in private preview, but this is where you can set up automation. So the piece that is new is not the automation, it's the type of automation that is new. So we can add automation rules like we always could. Now there's a few things that have been added. It used to be incidents or alerts, but now it's also when the incident is updated. And another thing that has changed recently was this, that used to be just and, but now you can do combination with and or. And this is the piece that is brand new, this add task. So you can add automation rule that is going to trigger anytime this analytic rule creates an incident. And you can create a playbook, you can change the status, you can change the severity, you can assign an owner automatically, or even add tags. All of this can be done without running a playbook. So you don't necessarily need to create a playbook to do these things, but you can. You can also run a playbook, which means logic apps can be triggered, and really the sky's the limit, I think, with logic apps. But this is the one that I wanted to pay attention to for now. You can add tasks now. So in this case, and actually I'm going to show you this one. I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to show you this one. So I added a few tasks. So this is kind of like a to-do list for your SOC analyst. Let's say I want them to go through a specific set of steps, you know, to follow when this specific alert generates an incident. And I set up these tasks that are then going to show up in my incident, and then my SOC team is going to go through them and they're going to be marking them off, and I'll show you what that looks like. So in my case, I said, I want you to look at virus total report for the incident on the incident IPs. And maybe the other thing that I can do is I could just give a link. I can put some pictures in here to, I don't know, anything that I need to, a diagram or whatever, or I can put some links that point to some external place that has like a detail of the very step that they need to do. Whatever I want, I can put in here. And I have a few tasks in here. And I can also do the same thing that I could do with any automation. I can do some expiration on them. And that doesn't probably make sense with adding a task, but some of the other ones like change the status, for example, like if I want to close automatically for this weekend, I might want to do that and then set an expiration for only for this weekend. Are you going to run this type of automation? But in the case of task, it's probably never going to expire. So that's the rule that I have here. And I'm going to show you right now what that does. So this is, see if I have any of those instances, I should. So this is some that I generated so that you can take a look at them. It's actually still generating. So when I see this incident, first of all, I want to show you all that other information that I gathered. First of all, it's actually telling me right here which analytic rule is coming from. So if I wanted to click on it, I can click on it. I'm getting all the entity mapping information that I did. And I'm also getting that additional custom details. Remember, I had a whole section that explained that had a lot of custom details. All that information is now showing here. It's available to my SOC analyst. They know, maybe I can put a phone number here for somebody to call them immediately, you know, whatever I think is useful, I can do that from here. And now these are the tasks. This is that new feature, and I can actually take a look at them in here. So all these are the tasks that I put to be for this type of incident. I want my SOC analyst to follow these steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want them to do, you know, and I want them to mark them off as they go. By the way, they can expand here. I didn't really put a whole lot of information here, but I could, and I could put those links that I told you about, and they can mark them off as they go along. So they looked at virus total, they reset the user password. They can update comments in here too if they want. But I love that they have now this list, the ability to add this customized list of tasks depending on the alert that triggered, that kind of gives them an idea of what to do. You know, what is it that we all want to do when this type of alert triggers. I think this is going to be very useful for SOC analysts and for MSSPs, who are majority of the ones that I work with. Another thing, and since I know I'm covering like some of these new features, but I also want to cover some of the existing features. This is also in preview, which is the similar incidents. So this is information, and maybe in my case, I don't really close a lot of these incidents, but especially if some of these are closed, it could be very useful for a SOC analyst to come and look at maybe a prior incident to see how that one was resolved. So that's why similar incidents was added. Alerts are now, these are and in this case, it's only one alert. You're going to see in the Fusion cases, it's typically a whole bunch of alerts that are together. And also, I chose not to group these together, but if they wanted to group them all together, I would be able to do so. And then I can also, even though I could add playbooks to be done automatically, to run automatically, I may not want to do that for everyone. So they would be able, the SOC analyst would be able to come here and run a playbook manually as well. And they can do so at the end. After the break, how you can do one of those. And then the bookmarks I'm going to cover later. Entities. These are the entities that I can look at, and I can, if I click on them, and I'm going to be taken to the entities page, which is, this is when we talk about UEBA. This is what we're going to talk about after the break. And then this is the one feature that was actually announced this morning to us internally. I think it was publicly made this morning, run playbooks. So it used to be that you can only run playbooks for alerts or incidents. Now you can run a playbook for a specific entity. And so there's actually a brand new, I'm actually going to pull up that blog so I can share it with you. Here we go. There's a new trigger in Logic Apps that is an entity instead of an alert or an incident. So you can create custom playbooks for that. So let's say if it was a device and you wanted to isolate that device after an alert, then you can run the playbook from here, or you can trigger it as well. I don't have any, and by the way, they're not showing any here because I haven't created any playbooks that have that trigger that is entity level. So I would have to create some of those playbooks. But again, it came out this morning, so I haven't had a chance to test with that. But I did want to share so that you're all aware. Okay, it's 12:31. So this is the ability to group certain alerts based on, and also change the or map the alert fields. I don't know if I'm using the correct or parameters is actually the word. Map those alert parameters to the information that is coming. So this is, and there's a blog on this which is probably going to do more justice than I'm doing to this new feature. But what this allows me to do is to group alerts. In this specific case, these alerts are coming from Defender for Cloud. So I'm looking at specific alerts. In my case, I changed the query a little bit different to what is shown in the blog, because those were the types of alerts that I was able to generate. And I was looking at these types of alerts that were being generated by on VMs, but they're all different types of alerts. So I want them to group them by alert type. And in this case, I do a mapping from, which is Sentinel entities to entities, which makes more sense when you see the actual incident being grouped. And then I add some alert details, which I also map. I'm changing correlation rule. The name of the alert or the name of the incident is going to be correlation rule and then the alert name, because again, there's different types of alerts that are coming from Defender for Cloud. So you're going to see them all grouped by the alert type, the alert name. And then I also map the tactics, severity, the provider onto the incident. This is, again, a brand new feature that was announced last week. And so what this allows me to do is that now I have, and I'm going to look back 7 days because I tested this last week. So I get these types of alerts now grouped together. See how they're grouped, but they're actually grouped by the type of alert that was generated. Suspicious behavior, suspicious file was observed, and some of these might be within the time frame that I said the incident. And then I'm also able to see the same entities that are actually coming from the alert itself. So this is, again, it's a brand new feature. I just wanted to show you that this is now possible. And I'll link the the blog from the product team so that you can get the information directly from them. Okay. All right. And all right, so let's jump in. Oh, the other thing that I missed from the analytic rules was that I showed you the schedule analytic rules, and I kind of talked a little bit about NRT, saying that they are hard-coded to run every minute, so you don't set up the actual timing of it, but you can still do grouping, you can still do automation for NRTs. And then the other one that I didn't cover was the Microsoft Incident Creation rules. So these are the ones where you can actually choose to generate incidents based on alerts that are coming from Microsoft services. So it could be Defender 365. So for example, in Defender for Cloud, I only want to generate incidents for mediums and highs. I don't want anything else. Maybe I found it too noisy or whatever. I can do that by creating these types of analytic rules. So that's the other type of analytic rule that I didn't cover. Okay, I'm going to jump into repositories because there was even some talk in there about Terraform. And I'm actually going to, let me just, I'm not going to share my slide. I'm just going to share the slides from here, if that's okay. And then I will give you the demo directly. So I'm going to demo repositories, which is a relatively new feature. But there are other types of automation, and this is the automation that is going to allow you as a partner or as an MSSP to make sure that your customers have the same content. So if you want them all to have the same analytic rules, if you want them all to have the same workbooks, playbooks, whatever it might be, and you want to be able to push these automatically to the various different workspaces. So this is the feature that I'm going to be able to demonstrate. That doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. Technically, we have the API, we have PowerShell module, and even Terraform is also supported. And these are the endpoints, and this is probably outdated. It's probably now more, but Security Insights is the API. The PowerShell modules, there are two. There was one that was community developed originally, but then the product team came out with their own. It was released January of 2021, so it's been around for a little while. And it is based on the Security Insights API. So you do have the opportunity to do some of your own automation there. This is the one that I'm going to demonstrate now. And so this is basically, it will allow, first of all, it will support both GitHub and Azure DevOps. And it's going to allow you to automatically move content from a specific repository onto various different workspaces. So as long as your workspace is connected, that's really the majority of the ones that you're going to need anyway. Analytic rules, automation rules, hunting queries, parsers, playbooks, workbooks. This is still considered to be in preview, so there's probably more coming along these lines. And from specifically to be able to manage this, there's also new features that are coming in the future for repositories itself, for the feature itself. So just keep an eye on it. I'm a huge fan of it. I wrote a blog on it, and I tried to share it with my partners as much as possible because I think it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. All right, so first, I'm actually going to trigger the actual workflow because I want to show it live, but I want to make sure that that because it takes like 2 minutes to run. So the first thing, I'm going to trigger it, and then I'm going to show you how it is configured. And let's see, which ones do I have on constraint? I have 2 rules right now, sensitive account and unconstrained delegations. So I'm going to use this one, I think. Account set, password not required. Okay, so this is another analytic rule that I am committing. Didn't do that right. And new rule, December 12th. I'm just committing it so that I can trigger the thing. Let's see if it triggered. Okay, so it's running. And now I can show you how I set it up because it's going to take like a little bit to run. So what and by the way, I'm actually going to show you the before and after here. So I have some rules here, the analytic rules that were created that are actually coming from repositories. There's these 2 of them. One I pushed on the 28th, one I pushed on the 22nd. This is the unconstrained delegation. This is the account is sensitive change. But now I just pushed another one. So what it's doing is it's actually pushing it to my workspace. How did I connect that workspace? I came here to repositories and I added this repository, and I can add a brand new one. And like I said, both GitHub and Azure DevOps are supported. As long as I can authenticate, so in my case, it's a private repository, so private repositories are supported. As long as I can authenticate, I can connect it to it. And see, actually, you can actually see it, that it's actually working and it's in progress. And I set this one up, and I'm not going to edit it, but I set this one up to support all 6 types, but I could have just set it up to support whichever ones I needed. And so what I'm able to do is I can now keep all these artifacts in one repository, and then I can connect all my customers to that repository, and I can push all this content to them. And we can actually watch this go in here, and you can actually see it, and we'll see it once it finishes. But I can also modify. Oops. When I configure this, I can actually modify how it's going to trigger. So I don't necessarily need to do it on the default, which is actually the default is actually only going to push new files. It used to be the opposite, where the default would push everything, but now the default is that it's only going to push new files. You can also modify it so that only the content within a specific folder is actually pushed out to your customers. And if you look in the MSSP workbook, or sorry, they call the MSSP playbook, but it's the white paper. It actually talks about different options for setting this up. So you can set it up. I can see that it's moving through this thing. You can actually watch it go through. You can actually deploy it where each customer has their own repository. Probably doesn't make that much sense. Or you can deploy it so that one for all the customers and maybe a special place for a special folder for each of the customers. You can do something like that. So you can do a combination so that you can, oh, now it's complete. So now I'm going to go look and refresh this, and my new analytic rule should be there automatically. Of course, not loading. And refresh. And there it is. This is the new one that just came in. And I can see it 12.12, 113. This is the one. And I can also see the source that it's actually coming from repositories. Also, when you go to modify any of these, if you notice in here, you're going to get like a little reminder here. This rule is synced with an external repository, so any changes will be overwritten by the next sync. So you do get a reminder that this is actually coming from an external repository. The other thing that is, there's another new feature that was added recently where you can actually prioritize the, let's see, what is it called? You actually can use configuration files to prioritize or exclude content from, specific customers. So it can be very useful, especially if you want to configure certain customers to have additional rules. Maybe they have different compliance requirements, so they need additional rules to be enabled. So you can do that with the configuration files feature that is that was added within repositories. I would say keep an eye on this. There's more stuff coming. There's some really cool stuff coming for Sentinel repositories. So I'm already a huge fan of it as it is right now. So I highly recommend that you do spend some time with it. It's pretty easy to set up, and let me know if you have any issues. Again, I wrote a blog on it. It's a very simple blog, but I'm still going to put it in the chat just so that if you want to give it a shot. And it also has some links on the documentation, so you can actually play with some of that configuration files and customizations that you can do. The other thing that I always forget to show, but I'm not going to forget today. That's this blade, the MITRE ATT&CK blade. This is really a workbook, but it's a really nice workbook or blade that shows you what is your coverage for the various tactics. And so, but also you can see what is available that you're not currently using too. So there might be some, especially when you click on these analytics rules, you can actually see all the stuff that you're not. This one is 2 in abuse elevation control mechanisms. There's only 2 right now. When I go to this, there's actually 4 additional ones that I'm not using. So there's a lot, especially if you're working in an environment where they're tracking using MITRE ATT&CK tactics and techniques. It's a very useful way to visualize where your coverage gaps are and to address those accordingly. Right. I did this. Sorry. Okay, so now let's jump into threat intelligence. After this, then I'll go to UEBA and Fusion. So for threat intelligence, there's actually various different ways that you can ingest data, threat intelligence data, into Sentinel. So first of all, you can just create it manually in here. You can bring in whatever IP address. You can just create it here. You can set your confidence level, and you can set the validity directly from here. You can also but we also have some connectors, data connectors. There's actually 2 types of connectors, and there's more coming. So the first one, and the one that I would suggest you try to use, is this one. It's the Styx Taxi connector, and it does support Taxi 2.0 and 2.1. It does not support Taxi 1.0. Because the schema is very different. And all the data that you are ingesting into Sentinel for threat intelligence is going to end up in this table, threat intelligence indicator. It doesn't matter how we're bringing it in, it's going to end up in this table. And all these different ways that I'm saying, you know, you can create it directly from the blade, or you can set up this connector or this other connector or some playbook. It's all going to end up in the same place. And actually, one thing that is new is if anybody was using Anomaly, there was a free feed, and they got rid of that recently. I recently found that there's somebody else that actually set up a free one. So this is what you set up, what you see set up here, pickup sticks. So this is one that I just set up last week because I heard that they added a new one. So if you want to test this out, go ahead, give it a shot. There was actually Rod Trent actually created a blog on the new free one. I'm gonna, I don't have the link. I'll find the link. I'll find the link and I will add it. If not, I'll add it to the other list of the links. But this is really the recommended way. It's very easy. You know, all you do is have to set up your server, your name, your taxi server name, the collection, and the user and password, which and then you're going to start ingesting data automatically. One thing it comes with is, so it comes with some queries, and it also comes in with some analytic rules. Very useful. Now, anything that has TI map on it, if it starts with TI map, and you're going to get them from here, you're going to get them from other sources, it means it's going to take a look. It's going to generate based on the data that has been ingested into this table, threat intelligence indicator table. So anything, any of those TI maps, that's what it's going to compare against. Your threat intelligence is going to compare against. There's another analytic rule that is called, what's it called? As long as it loads, right? This one, Microsoft Threat Intelligence Analytics. This rule is actually not reading from your ingested TI data. This rule is actually coming in from our own Microsoft Threat Intelligence data. So even if you're not ingesting anything in there, as long as you leave this on, sorry. By the way, this is on by default, so I wouldn't disable it at all, but if, or maybe make sure that it's not disabled, hasn't been disabled. It shouldn't, it's not very noisy. It's actually pretty straightforward, but this rule is actually going to generate alerts based on Microsoft data. Hang on, sorry, I have a tickle on my throat. Okay, sorry about that. Now, this is actually going to generate, it's actually going to compare, yeah?
Angelica, just to because there's quite a few questions regarding MSSP and how we can, bring in the threat intelligence data, and can it be deployed across all the workspaces? And so if you want to take a quick look at the chat, I think it might be helpful. There's quite a few MSSP related questions. You are muted, Angelica.
Okay, the question is that this TI data connector is deployed within an MSSP workspace. Can the TI data be leveraged across multiple client workspaces? Yes, but it's going to, you can, but you would have, like this one is not, this one is only going to work on your, this one you don't need to worry about because it's actually coming from Microsoft, right? So exclude this one for a minute. The other TI maps, you would actually have to modify them to look at other workspaces. Because if you look at those, analytics rules, let me show TI map. Like this one. This one's going against the common security log, right? So when you take a look at this query, it's not looking across workspaces. It's only looking within this workspace. So if you wanted to make one that looks across other workspaces, you would have to modify the query yourself. In the The other one, the one that I was talking about earlier, this one is actually just don't disable it in any of the workspaces, customer workspaces. This one's actually bringing in data from externally from, and it actually, it used to be, and I'm actually going to link, because I actually have the link right here handy for me. So I'm going to put it in the chat. The few things that I wanted to mention about this is that it's comparing your data that is on syslogs, Ceph, and Windows DNS logs. And it used to only contain the domain indicators. Last year, IP indicators were added. And then recently, TI data that is coming from MDTI, which is the RiskIQ acquisition by Microsoft, has also been added. That's what that blog talks about in there, the one that I just pinged you in there. And so this is the one that I wouldn't disable at all, and it doesn't even matter. You don't even need to see you don't even need to ingest any data into any of the workspaces. For the TI map, you do. Another way that actually, let me see, was there another question in there? No, there isn't. Threat intel is preferably required to be a global service where you have multiple customers sharing. Yes, but you would have to just make sure that you modify those analytic rules so that it actually looks at the right place, in all the various different workspaces that you're looking at, because it's not going to generate if it doesn't have the concept of where to compare it to. Otherwise, it's only going to, by default, it's only going to compare it to whatever the local workspace is. Okay.
Angelica, thank you.
Yep. And then the other thing that you can do is you can ingest using playbooks. So I'm actually going to show you that one. And this is a very old one, but it's still very useful. And even if you're getting it from a different source, you could just like reuse this playbook. These playbooks actually they were provided for free by Microsoft. And where is it called? Maybe it's on page 2. C19, this is from COVID-19. The playbooks were provided for free, and the data, the indicators of compromise were also provided for free, especially for a POC. You could probably start with these. There's an actual 2 playbooks to do this. It actually, and I'm going to show you these playbooks. You can see that I have them running on my workspace. It's actually set, and you can change the interval. By default, it's going to run every day. It's going to go out to get some of that data that I was telling you that was provided by Microsoft. It's in the sample data. And then it's going to work in conjunction with this other one, which actually imports it it gets the data that the other one went and got and actually brings it into that same table, to the threat intelligence indicators table. So you have the connectors, you have the playbooks. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is there's another connector. So I only spoke about the taxi connector, but there's a second connector. How can I put this? So this is in preview. It has been in preview for a long time. It will likely be replaced by something else in the future. So if this is if you're using it, just keep an eye out because there are news that are coming around this one. And actually some partners might already be testing some of these newest features. I think they're in private preview right now. And they might even be in public preview already right now. But the way that this works, so this would be something that is not supported through StickTaxi or some playbook or some other way. This is the way that you would do it. And what you do is you go and register an application, an Azure AD application, and then you have to make sure that you add these permissions to it. Threat indicators, read, write, owned by. This is what it's going to allow it to write to that table. And then, and if you're familiar with Azure AD, applications, it's really a service principal that you're creating. As an enterprise application would be a service principal, but it's the equivalent of a service principal. So you have an application ID, and then you have a password, which is it could be a certificate or it could be a secret, and then you use that for your application to connect to Sentinel to be able to write to this table. And so this is how this one would work. There are some playbooks that actually use, which is the reason why you see it light up. Some of the playbooks are actually using this connector, and it works in that manner. You know, it's just like any other custom application would, just has permissions to write to this table. This table is the same table that you see through here. So any of the data that I see through this threat intelligence blade, it's the same data that I'm ingesting. So if I modify something here, or if I import additional from a file or creating it manually in here, I'm importing it into the same table. So I'd be able to, any of those TI maps analytics tools will work against this as well. And the last thing I wanted to see, I'm not going to edit this one, but if I revoke any of these, it's not going to generate any incidents, because all of those TI maps analytics rules, they're checking for active equals true. So if I revoke it, active is going to be set to false, which means it's not going to generate any incidents, any alerts based on this specific indicator of compromise. And then the so I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you, my second to last thing on threat intelligence, is the playbook. So there are some solutions. In fact, there's a solution from RiskIQ that I have connected here. Thank you. This solution is a RiskIQ Illuminate. So you do need, and actually you can test this as well. You do need a connection, an API key to connect to RiskIQ. They actually provide you 30 days for free. So if you wanted to test this, you could. Look, I can see that I have some updates here that I should update. But it comes with 27 playbooks that, and I'm going to show you one of those working. What the idea of this solution is that it's another way that you can use threat intelligence data that is outside of Sentinel, but that you can use it to enrich your incidents without having to ingest some of these data. You can ingest it, but you have the option not to. So I'm actually going to go through some of, I'm going to look for a specific type of event, incident that I know is going to update. Okay, this one. Okay, so this incident right now, I'm actually going to open it up. This incident here, it was, this is one of those that I was telling you that I was cheating, because I'm actually using a watch list to generate this. I'm picking these entities. These are the entities that I have in a watch list, and so every time that it runs, it generates an incident. But I'm cheating because these are entities that I know that are going to have some data on RiskIQ, so that I can show you this. But if you see this right now, status new, severity is medium. There's no tags. There are no comments, nothing here. So I'm going to run a playbook. That is the triage playbook from RiskIQ. So all this does, and I'll show you what it does. I'm just going to run it. I can see the runs here. Might take a minute to run. All this does is going to go out to RiskIQ, find out, hey, RiskIQ, do you know anything about these entities in here? Please, whatever please let me know about it. That's really all it's doing. All right, so it ran already. By the way, if I wanted to troubleshoot this, if I got some errors, I could just click on the view run, and I would be able to go, and I would get like a little exclamation point in red in here if it failed at any of these steps. But like I said, this is going out to Sentinel. It's going to look at hosts. It's going to look at IPs, and then for any of them that it finds, it's going to update my incident. And so in this case, I'm going to refresh it. So it raised. First thing it did was it raised the severity to high. It changed the status to active automatically, and it also added a tag, risk IQ malicious. So it actually found some malicious IPs, and then it added all these comments. So it brings to your SOC analyst all this information, and I ran it manually just to show you the before and after, but obviously you can set this up to just run automatically for any of the alerts that you have. And it raises the severity automatically, so the SOC analyst knows what they need to prioritize, and then it brings all that information to them. Why did I raise it? Because it found some malicious IPs, and then it even gives me the link. It brings me the link to the specific article that I need to go and read about. Of course, it's not found. Let's see this one here. Well, typically it does. I don't know why it's not finding it. It's all updated. It all updated to the same one too. Well, typically gives me the link to the right one. Today it's not working. But the idea is that it's going to actually bring you all that information to the SOC analyst right at their fingertips, so that they know that there are some malicious IPs within this incident. There's something that they need to pay attention to, and that should be should be a higher severity. If it had found, by the way, suspicious IPs, it would have left it at medium. It would still add the tags, and also these are provided out of the box for you, but you can modify them. These are your playbooks to set to run as appropriate. So if you want to automatically add another step where it automatically assigns it to somebody else or a specific team of people that deal with these issues, you can also modify those playbooks to do that type of thing. The last thing I wanted to show you, and you probably know this already, but I do want to show you, is that security.microsoft. You do get some threat intelligence data from security.microsoft.com, and I show you this because so in my case, this specific tenant is actually connected to. Actually, let me show you some of the Mimikatz alerts. This is a Mimikatz alert that is actually coming from Defender for Cloud. And actually, this is probably a good thing that I show you. So when I open this incident, I'm automatically going to get a link. And this is the same thing for Defender 365 as well. So when I open this link, I can come in here and it'll give me a link that brings me over to Defender for Cloud to troubleshoot the specific alert that generated that. And even within Defender for Cloud, it gives me a link also to Defender 365 portal, which is where I was heading to show you some threat intelligence information. Because in my case, I have Defender for Cloud, Defender for Servers within Defender for Clouds. So that includes Defender for Endpoint. So what that means is that I now have access to this threat analytics blade within Defender 365. There's some very valuable information here. There's a lot of just generic threat intelligence data that is shared by Microsoft with customers through this blade. Some of it is actually targeted towards your tenant specifically. So anything that affects your tenant will be highlighted in this area. The most active alerts affecting your organizations, but generic information about other stuff that is being tracked. And some of this stuff also comes with their own. So if you look at the analyst report in here, and see, it actually gives you some of the KQL queries that you need to be able to hunt or to correlate or to even create make these KQL queries into their own analytic rules and generate incidents. So just wanted to highlight that sometimes people don't know they have this area here too, most of the times, that they can actually gather information from as well. And remember, those integrations are bidirectional. So if I update it on one side, it'll be, or if I close it on one side, it'll be closed on the other. So that's there as well. Okay, so the next topic, and then I'm going to jump into UVA, is notebooks. I am not an expert on notebooks, not by far, but I like to show it because I want to make sure that you're aware that this is here for you, and it's super helpful. I'm actually going to start my node. So you can set up notebooks. Let's see, I have a node that is stopped, and I'm going to start it so you can see some of the stuff that you can run. But so there's notebooks like this one, where it's just, you know, teaching you about machine learning, and notebooks are Jupyter notebooks. So if you're familiar with Jupyter notebooks already, if you have teams that are familiar with Jupyter notebooks, you can run them within Sentinel. There are some really nice Sentinel workbooks. There are some templates here, and a lot of them have to do with steps, like following steps, to like a guided investigation for anomaly lookup, a guided investigation for the SolarWinds post-compromise. So it's a really good way to follow step-by-step guides, you know, so that everybody can do the same thing, especially if you have a 7x24 where you'll have a team working during the day, but then they have 2 off hours. It has to be passed to somebody else. In that notebook, you can see what they did, and you can see some of the steps that they took and the investigation that they did. Like in this one, guided investigation, you can see, you can run code directly from here. And you know, whatever notes the previous analysts say, you know, they made it up to here and then they continue on from here. This is a really great way to do those guided investigations and to do repeatable tasks. In fact, actually, I'm going to pull my slide deck for some notes on that. This is really the best way to visualize this. Here we go. So, because we've seen, and we talked a lot of things today, but we've talked about playbooks earlier, the automation. We talked about workbooks, which are those dashboards. And I probably didn't spend enough time on the workbooks. I might come back to that if I have time. But now I'm talking to you about notebooks. You're like, where do they fit in? One of the things that I was saying was the chain of repeatable tasks. So if I want my SOC analyst to follow these steps each and every time that they do this, there might be some code included in there, some Python code or some some code that KQL that looks at Sentinel. And actually the other one is that you can bring in external data. So let's say I want to run some queries against Sentinel, but then I want some data from ServiceNow CMDB, and I want to compare data. A notebook, a Jupyter notebook is where you can do that, because you don't need that data in Sentinel, right? The CMDB data from ServiceNow, you don't need it in Sentinel, but you do need to be able to correlate that. So Jupyter notebooks are the way to do that. Any kind of, let's see, represent high level data, integration with external systems, which I was talking about. You can do that with Jupyter notebooks. There's even a hackathon that is dedicated specifically to Jupyter notebooks. And like I said, I am not an expert on this. I just really mostly want to talk about them because I think you should be aware of them. They also have really nice ways to represent data. I'm trying to look for one of them. Maybe this one's a better one. To visualize, it's a really great way to visualize data. See what I mean? You can actually do like time series anomalies visualization like you see in here. And I don't know if I've used this example before, but there's a partner that I work with that uses these notebooks. The manager, the director of the group, he looks at one of these notebooks every week. And what he's looking at is ways that he can optimize his operation. So he wants to figure out which tasks should be automated, what are the tasks that his SOC analysts are doing over and over again? What are the noisy analytic rules that have generate too many false positives? He just looks at data and in a weekly basis from a notebook, and he's able to focus his team or to focus his development team into automating some of these things that are going to make the SOC analysts' lives better and hopefully prevent burnout too, because you don't want to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. So the sky's the limit for probably the types of scenarios where you can use these Jupyter notebooks from, and there's a lot of resources. Actually, in this set of links, right here, there's a whole section on notebooks. There's additional information on them. And there's the InfoSec Jupyterthon, because that was the hackathon. So if you want to learn about them, and then don't know if you might know already, Mystic Pi is a library that is created so that hopefully gives you like a head start on using these notebooks. So please make use of these information that is provided to you. And if you're, and the one thing that they see as a like a con, which I don't really see it as a con, more of a, it just takes a little bit more time, is that notebooks might be higher learning curve because it does require some coding knowledge. But if you already have teams or members that are already familiar with some of these code, then you can take advantage of these and hopefully make the lives easier for your for the rest of your SOC team. And also, if you have data scientists in your teams, they're really going to love the ability to use these notebooks. So I did mention that you have different types of notebooks here. So some of those, I only configure mine with an Azure machine learning workspace, but you can also configure it with the Synapse. When I was talking about data scientists, they can take, and there's actually some templates that are already provided that use Azure Synapse. So, so if you have data scientists in your team, they're probably going to be excited about having something like this available to them. I haven't tested that part yet, but it is available. So I just wanted to make sure that you are aware as well. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna now actually jump out of the demo, and I'm gonna go back to the slide deck for a minute, because I want to cover the slides on UEBA and on Fusion, and it's just makes more sense to do it this way.
Angelica, there's some questions regarding Risk IQ and the costs of the TI indicators from Risk IQ.
Let's see. What are the information we need to search for? Oh, okay. It must be the last one. Yes, couple. Okay, 17. Yeah. Yes. Risk IQ is Defender for threat intel. Yeah, and it is MDTI, and actually it was kind of divided into two different services, but MDTI is one of them. So the Risk IQ playbooks, Illuminate, will probably redirect to MDTI at some point in time, but right now it's not. It's still, my API is still connecting to the Risk IQ API, but it is, yes, that is correct. MDTI is Risk IQ. And in fact, the threat intelligence that you're seeing through that other analytic rule that is getting information from Microsoft is an MDTI feed, which is previously Risk IQ. So yeah, notebooks are found on their threat management blade, and I'll show you again when we come back to the demo. All right.
Thank you, Angelica.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to jump into UEBA. Okay. it's just easier to explain. Some of this is easier to explain with slides. Actually, we'll have some links on MDTI. I'll share them because those are missing because I just added them recently to the document. So what I'll do is I'll copy them. Actually, I'm going to copy them right now. This time. Here, Sentinel, MDTI. Here, I'm just going to copy and paste from my notes. There's a few MDTI links in there. And the risk IQ stuff is at the bottom because that was my original testing from the one that you saw work in the playbook. All right. So let's go back to EVA. All right. Okay. I know it's a lot of information. It's a marathon of information today. So thank you for keeping up with us. Okay, so next we're talking user and entity behavior analytics. This is a piece that I don't think it gets enough attention, and it really should. This is very powerful. Not only that, but a lot of the fusion machine learning algorithm kind of depends on a lot of these anomalies that are generated by UEBA. So I'm going to tie those two together today and hopefully get everyone to at least give it a shot. So for UEBA, the goal is to build a very comprehensive profile for the user, across peer groups, which is really unique to us, to Microsoft. So for a user, it would be like, which devices does the user log on to? Which applications do they normally log on to? From which location do they normally connect to? Which resources are they normally accessing? During which hours of the day do they do that? And what's the volume? What's the frequency? All of that stuff is building a profile for that user. So it's identifying what its normal behavior so that it can easily find anomalies. And so anything that deviates from that normal behavior are going to be anomalies. And anomalies is a word that you're going to hear because that's actually the name of the table where they're going to be stored. And you actually saw a little bit, and I didn't go into detail, but there's actually some new templates in the analytic rules, and there's a new tab called anomalies. So there's some scenarios there already there for you. What are the scenarios that we're targeting with UEBA? Normally, or in general, is abuse of privileged identities. So anything that has high impact on the environment, and then we're going to profile them accordingly. Also, compromised user and entity. So an attacker that gains access to a user account and then starts working their way through to the attack kill chain, which is obviously going to deviate from the user's profile. And then finally, insider threat and data exfiltration. So you can have maybe rogue or disgruntled employees who start to collect sensitive data information and then exfiltrate it outside the organization. Those are the scenarios that we're targeting. And then from Sentinel, we tackle this from 4 main pillars. At the core is being able to detect those anomalies, those user profile anomalies. But we also want to provide the SOC analyst with whatever context information we have. So bring it to them to make it useful to them. That's where those entity pages come in. The entity pages, I kind of clicked on one of them earlier and I said, this is where UVA showcases the data. Those entity pages are, and it's not just user, it's going to be a VM, it could be a host, it could be an IoT device. And then you're going to see data, and then you're going to see on the left and on the right, you're going to see insights for based on those machine learning algorithm. And then on the bottom, you're going to see timelines. And those timelines, some of them are out of the box, but you can also customize those timelines to even from your own custom data can show in there. And I'll show you how you do that. And we also wanted to make sure that onboarding was easy and fast, and it is. It's, in fact, it's a flip of a switch, literally. All right, so this is a little bit about how the agent works. So we begin with all this raw data. And first thing we do is user resolution. We're going to take all the various identifiers. So it could be a UPN, a SAM account name, a SID, whatever we have. And then we're going to resolve them all to create a single entity. And then we do behavior profiling. So we do this in 3 layers. So there's a user behavior. So has this user done this before? Is it common for them to do this? We do peers. That's, again, that's something that is unique to us. So we do a peer behavior. Is this identity common for the users' peers, for the group members? And it's not just for users, it's also for devices, again. And then we do organization behavior. Is this activity common in this tenant at all for anyone? And then we enrich the data with additional context, like threat indicators from our own Microsoft Threat Intelligence data, and other information. Then we focus on the blast radius. So like the user's potential impact. Does the user have high privileges? So they're going to have a higher blast radius. Is the user higher up in the organizational chart? They're going to have a higher blast radius. And then the output of all that, and the UBA engine is anomalies and insights. Those anomalies that are typically informational by default. They're not going to generate an alert or an incident by default, but they're going to be combined with other multi-stage attack scenarios. Okay, and okay, so this is a little bit about how the engine, well, first of all, that it's turned on by literally a flip of a switch, and it's going to take the raw data and it's going to be ingested, and then it's going to take information from, it's showing here Azure Active Directory, but you're going to see other sources as well. And then the output of it is going to be those anomalies that I was telling you about. And just few of some of the data sources just to show you what can be ingested. And again, this is just, I'm really focusing here on the anomalies table. This is the name of the table. By default, these anomalies are not going to generate incidents by default because they're classified as informational, but they are going to be taken into account when you go to those multi-stage attacks, and when we talk about Fusion, you'll see them. So they're very useful to be able to correlate other alerts. You can, by the way, you can actually modify that too. So if you wanted to actually generate incidents, you can. I'm going to skip this to talk about Fusion, and then we'll do both of them together. All right, so this is where we're talking about Fusion. And by the way, Fusion is on by default. You don't actually have to even turn it on. So this is going to look at all the activity wherever those resources are. And then I was telling you that we're identifying those anomalies. And we're also going to combine that with the security alerts that we're getting from all these other different sources. And then we add them, and that's where the machine learning comes in. And the models, by the way, those models are really constantly learning. So they're actually even going to learn from when your own SOC analysts close the incident, whatever feedback they provide, whether it's a false positive, a true positive, whatever it was, it's actually going to feed those models to learn for future reference as well. And then we can, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to correlate those low fidelity information alerts into high fidelity incidents. Ultimately, it's just to allow the SOC to be able to prioritize the incidents that they need to prioritize. And okay, so it's you're gonna see in the configuration that the analytic, it's really only one analytic rule, but it does cover 122 multi-stage attack scenarios. So, and I think it's 122 on the last count. I don't know if it has changed since then, but it does, some of the scenarios that you're gonna see is the ability to detect potential ransomware. We also have ability to detect emerging or unknown threats. And I'll show you all that. And I'm going to show you a combination of my tenant and the other test tenant that you all have access to, because they actually have quite a few of those incidents on that one. So if you want to demonstrate this to customers, I highly recommend you use that tenant because it has a lot of these. The one thing that I wanted to prioritize here is that, first of all, you don't need all of these sources. The more, the better, more accurate it's going to be, but you don't need all of them. It's just going to take whatever ones it can access. And then remember how I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the analytic rules? If you do custom schedule analytic rules, make sure that you have the tactics and entity mapping, because then the Fusion machine algorithm is going to be able to pick those up and correlate them and into those multi-stage attack scenarios. Oh, now I can jump back to the demo. All right. All right, so first I'm going to go to UVA. This is if you didn't have it configured, this is where you would go and turn it on, and literally, of course, it's gonna fail on me. Let me reload this. Okay, so see this, it's really a flip of a switch. You do need to be global admin or security admin to be able to turn on this feature. Just saying, all this data that is coming from Azure AD and from all these different sources, it's okay for it to come to Sentinel, basically. And then what you're going to get, I'm actually first going to show you one of these pages. And actually, while I'm here, I'm going to expand this to maybe 14 days, because I want to show you that there's different types of, and actually every time I come here, there's even more. So you have like users and accounts. You also have hosts, you have IPs, IoT devices, and even Azure resources. It used to be like 2 or 3, and now there's 5 of them here. So there's quite a bit of entities being added. I'm going to show you one of these, and if I don't find one that is as useful, I'm going to pull data from the other portal, the other tenant, because it does have a lot more data than I have. I'll do that. Let's see. They have more data than I do. This is one of my favorite ones to show. So this user is pdemo. This is the user. If you get access to this tenant, this is the user that you're going to be using here to get in. What I like about it is because user is breaking all the rules, because there's a whole bunch of people using the same user. And so you see some of the behavior is like unfamiliar sign-in properties. Sometimes you'll see the impossible travel type of stuff in here, because it's everything that you shouldn't be doing. Everybody's using this and they're locking it up all the time, and it does get reset. But you know, it's a really good example to use for UEBA, because it's everything that you shouldn't do. So I like that it's able to bring all this information about the user, but I really like those insights. And this is information on peers and based on security group information, but it also gives you actions. For example, and this is only looking at the last day in here, but if the user recently added a multi-factor authentication, if the user reset the password recently, things like that, you're bringing all that information to the SOC analyst. I have worked with SOC teams where they have to go to IT to get permission, to get the logs, to come through the logs to be able to get some of this information. So the fact that it's bringing all this information to the SOC analyst and it's putting it right there, and it's highlighting the parts that are important too. So it could be certain actions, like if the user recently deleted a whole bunch of files, or things like that. All these insights are going to be brought up directly to the SOC analyst. And you actually see some of these insights are starting to reference external sources too, like this is an SAP user data. But this is the type of information that you would be able to see it. And I'm showing you a user, but it's any entity, any of those other entities. So it could be an IoT device. For an IoT device, for example, in here, you would be able to see like the sensor that is detected that device. And maybe by knowing the sensor, you know like which floor this thing is located on, or which area of the manufacturing facility this is located on. So it's a lot of very useful information that is at the fingertips of that SOC analyst. And this area over here, you can actually customize. So there's a lot of this timeline here, you can actually customize it. So I'm going to go back to mine. And I'm going to, this is some of the data based on mine. But in here, customize entity page, I have the ability. There are some templates that are provided, and some of these are actually very, very nice. Account was created on this host. Account was added to local administrators group and domain admins. Some of these are, really just useful out of the box. But there are some you might have Okta data. And so you want to go, and I don't have an Okta table, but if I did, I would be able to create a query based on that Okta information and then add that to my timeline for the user. So you can customize this timeline that I'm showing here. Where is that? Here. This timeline that I'm showing here, I can customize it to add that Okta, I don't know, resetting of the factor, of the second factor, or whatever it might be, whatever data I'm looking for. You can add that information in there. All right, so, and then let's jump into the Fusion piece. So for Fusion, only thing that you have is one analytic rule. And again, you don't have to turn this on. This is on by default, which is a good thing. And actually, this is the rule right here. This Fusion, you could just sort if you don't see it right here. Normally, for me, it's over here. But this is the advanced multi-stage attack detection rule type. And this is a lot of the information that I showed you on that slide, the 122 scenarios, the various different sources, and also the ones that you can customize to do that. And if you want to read more about Fusion, you can do that here. But what you can modify here is here. You can disable some of these sources. So let's say, I don't know, maybe for Defender for IoT, you found that informational ones are, I don't know, cause it to be too noisy or whatever the case. And you don't want Fusion to take advantage of that. You can disable that. And you can disable the entire, everything from Defender for IoT. I don't recommend that you do, but if you found it to be maybe you're troubleshooting or whatever, you can disable some of these. So you can just move the slider and disable it. And then you can also disable specific patterns. So there are, let's see, then I'm going to show you that over here because I don't have. So on the instance itself, I'm going to show you some of the incidents. I think some of these. Let's see, this one. Okay. See how this specific scenario, crypto mining activity following impossible travel. There's this link, exclusion link. If I click on that, what that's going to do is it's going to add that exclusion pattern to that analytic rule. So that's how you would go about if you want to exclude a specific pattern. Now I'm not gonna add it here, but that's how you just wanted to show you how you go about doing that. I'm actually going to show you some of the attacks so that you can see this is actually on my instance. Actually, I have to look back, I think 7 days. Yeah, so these are various different attacks. So like this one is for ransomware activity. this one. Most of mine were ransomware, I think, what I was doing. But you can see how data from various different sources is combined into one. And actually, I'm gonna click on it. This one has 52 different alerts associated with this. And you can see how it just took alerts from different places, Defender for Cloud, Defender for Endpoint, from Sentinel, from some other ones, and it combined it into one enormous, and actually probably good way to visualize it is to click on Investigate, where you can actually visualize. This one's a huge one. You can see, I mean, when you see one or two of them, but when you see like all this many, it actually, this was obviously an attack on this DC, my cleverly named ACDC01. And I can get, see all the various different artifacts that are related to it. I can see, and by the way, I can click on, from right here, I can click on this file name, and if I thought that this was, should be an indicator of compromise and should be added to my TI table, I can add it directly from here. This was another thing that was recently added. So I can take action directly from this investigation area. The same thing with these hashes too. If I have these hashes, I should be able to add them. I have more than, I'll add to TI, or now because of that new feature that was added where I can run playbooks at entity level, I can also run playbooks for those directly from here as well. So there's a lot of, what Fusion does is this. This is really the power of Fusion. It's being able to correlate an attack that, you know, and actually maybe on the timeline I can see it better. It started at 2:19 p.m. Where Defender for Cloud caught something, and then it moved all the way to 6 p.m. Where Defender for Endpoint finds something else. So that's what Fusion is able to do. It's able to correlate a set of different alerts that, you know, had it not been for Fusion, that is able to put that together, because the entity, because of the user, because of whatever it is that it finds that it's in common, it's able to determine that these things are related to one another. And maybe not in this example, I was looking for, oh, here it is. This one is an informational one. This one on its own would never generate an alert. This one's malware was prevented. And some examples that you'll see is like the creation of a new service account. So the registration of a new application. It's not on itself going to create an incident, but Fusion detects that this informational alert that doesn't create an incident is actually related to a big multi-stage attack, which is actually a high severity incident in Sentinel. So that's the power of it. You still, by the way, have the same type of information that we showed earlier with alerts, with bookmarks. I actually didn't show bookmarks very well, or maybe I'll show it through some of these. Actually, let me go back to the investigation. Don't know if you're familiar with bookmarks, so I'm going to show you real fast what they are. Let's go to one of these queries. I have to load it. Yep. All right. Go to this one. These I'm going to go into. This is actually going to send me straight to the query, into the logs, to the KQL itself, and then there I can save some of these entries to maybe correlate to something else later. Except it's not working. Right, maybe here it comes. Oh, okay. There's no result on this one, of course. So that's not going to work. Let's find one that actually has some results. Oh, wait, this one then. That's some results. I thought I had some results. And let me expand this. I'm not able to get a query that has some results. I'll show you from a different angle. But what the idea is that you're going to be able to bookmark certain rows that are retrieved, and then you can use them for further investigations while you're hunting. So the area where you would be able to use them would be here within hunting. Actually, while I'm here, maybe I'll spend some time on this. Let me make sure that I cover everything related that I had planned to cover for Fusion. And I did. Okay. So while I'm here, I wanted to show you some of the things that you can do in this hunting blade is that first of all, you're able to, some of these queries are actually going to come to you through Content Hub solutions. Sometimes they come included with the data connectors too. Some of them you just create your own hunting queries too. Some of them are provided in blogs that we create through the security blogs that we provide. And you can use them in various different areas. But in here, you can actually select some of these queries by specific MITRE tactics, and you can search, and then you can choose to run some of them or all of them, and you can expand the time in here, but you can run all the queries, and then you can zone into the ones that actually have any results. So if I'm just searching in general, see, I can ignore all these, but then this one actually has 7. There was a query return, so I can actually go in here and take a look at the results. So this, and this is actually, while I'm here, this is probably an easier way to show you those bookmarks. So I can actually add a bookmark. Let's say I found some information, maybe these actually, I'll take all the ones that are related to app service. And so I want to add a bookmark, something that I can, relate to later on while I'm investigating. It's to share, maybe I want to share it with somebody else in my team so that they can get the information that they were looking for. I would be able to save this as a maybe I'll just put a paper name to it just in case something else exists to it, and then I can create that and I can have it available to be referenced later on. So these are the bookmarks, and then you can find those bookmarks within here. This is the tab where you would go and find those bookmarks. Livestream is a way to run a query. It's not going to generate an alert, but it is a way to run a query to see the results pretty much live, as the name states. So you have the ability to do this. The other thing that you can do from here is you can create an analytic rule based on that query. But again, this is not going to generate an alert. This is something that you're watching as live, as the data comes in, and you can just leave it running for a while there. Let's see. I am going to see. How are we doing on time, Indranil?
We are doing pretty good. We have about 15 minutes.
15 minutes left. Okay, that's what I thought it was. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to check my notes to make sure. I know it's been a marathon of information today, but I wanted to, okay, I did find something that I haven't covered. So what I'm going to do is check my notes, but if you have any questions, let me know. One of the areas that I didn't spend time on was workbooks. I kind of flew by it, and I did want to show you some really neat workbooks that are available to you, especially if you have government organizations as customers. Some really, and some of these, by the way, in content, they come from Content Hub, like the NIST 853. This workbook actually comes from a Content Hub solution. There's a whole YouTube video, and I think its own accompanying blog that is dedicated to going over this solution. It's a really nice solution, and there's a few of these. There's a CMMC one, there's a Zero Trust one. Just picked one to show you what these workbooks, by the way, these workbooks are templates. So they are provided to you, they're free of cost, but you can modify them. So you know, if there's something that you want that you don't like or whatever about it, you can modify them. But this one, for example, NIST 853, it's a workbook that uses a lot of the information that is actually coming from Defender for Cloud. So you actually notice that a lot of these controls and my current compliance with this controls is shown. And this data is actually coming from Defender for Cloud. The cool thing is, if you have permissions, you can actually click on remediate and just take action from here, especially this red one here. OS data, this should be encrypted. If I have permissions, I can actually go and remediate this. And these are, by the way, workbooks can also be pinned to dashboards. So you can actually pin this to a dashboard, and then you can share that dashboard with your customer if you don't want them to have access to Sentinel for some reason. They just want to look at that one dashboard with information. You can do that. And some of these are like this one is one of my favorite ones because it includes so much information, but also because it includes, I'm actually gonna select some of these. It actually includes information on the controls themselves. Like sometimes you're trying to meet a control and you have no idea what the requirements are for that specific control. This actually, and it actually includes links to the documentation directly from here, like this one. Let's see. Oh, like if I click on this AC2, I actually go straight to the NIST page that talks about that specific control so that I get an idea of what it is, the control that I'm actually trying to meet. Some of these are very, very, very detailed. But I love having that at the, you know, right there, tip of my hands. If I need to know more about it, the logs that are actually populating this, maybe I'm not getting any data from some of these, I can go and click on this information and figure out what it is that I'm missing. How do I go about configuring that? And this is one of many of these solutions. Like I said, there's a few of these solutions that are available. There's a team dedicated that basically that's all they do. So they keep generating them and they explain, and they actually create these videos too, where they explain to you how to go about using them. And like I said, they're free of charge. I mean, you can find this Content Hub solution here. And they come with more than just, see, like this one, I was showing you the workbook, but this one comes with 3 playbooks and an analytic rule. I think there's a CMMC. This CMMC one comes with some analytics rules and some playbooks too, and a workbook. But so these are solutions. They're here. They're available to you. They're free of cost. You know, and even if you don't have government organizations as customers, NIST 853 is a lot of other organizations that use that as their security standards to follow. So some of these may even be useful to non-government organizations too. Or something else. I think that's. Sorry, I'm just checking through my notes to make sure that I covered everything and I didn't forget. I'm sure as soon as this call is over, I'm going to remember something. Oh, okay. I did just notice. There are some workbooks that are also provided directly in here, like in the incidents blade. It's not, you can also find it through the Workbooks security efficiency workbook. But it is also provided directly in here. So if you're looking for something that gives you like an overall view of all your incidents and you want to show that to your customer, you can take this workbook, you can pin it to a dashboard and then give them access to that as well. And then maybe it's your management that wants to be able to look at this. So maybe you want to be able to give that information for each and every one of your customers. So you can also use the security operations efficiency. And actually, the last one I want to show you, this is actually another solution from Content Hub. It's created from one of the GBB. It's a SOC framework. Oh, here it is. process framework. This is super useful. Oh, am I in the right one? I guess I haven't installed it. Maybe I'll go ahead and I thought I had it installed. I want to go ahead and install it real fast. It's a really nice solution. Just gonna go through this. You can see how fast you can configure a solution. That I had the workbook in there. I want to see if I can pull it up on the other. In the meantime, the thing that I find useful about this is that if you don't have a SOC, or even if you have a SOC and you want to like make sure that you're following all the things that you should be following, this is a good solution. This one, I think it's this one. So this will give you like an overview of everything. It will give you even an overview of what your incident response planning should look like. Have you done some of these? Have you planned for some of these scenarios? What should your process look like? This guy, his name is Rin. He went through the process of building this solution, and he gives you a lot of information about kind of building your whole security operations, how you should do severities. You don't have to follow this, but if you don't have anything and you want to start with, this is a fantastic guide to follow. And even if you want to compare yours to what this guy is putting together, it's probably a great review of what your process should be for your SOC. But I think it's useful to. I have one partner that is using this for government customers, and they really have found it to be very useful. So it is available on Azure Gov as well. So if you're wondering, it is. Again, I'm a huge fan of this one. It even tells you like the training that you should be looking at, SC200, and he links some of that information here as well. So just wanted to share that one. It's the SOC process framework solution, and it's I just installed it. Okay,